Nice to meet you. Make line run again. That is a good hat. I would like it to apply to both sides.
Right. Yeah.
Well, okay.
Judy from Sheldon, we met before. All right. Therese.
Yes.
As we come up on 6:30, I'll give you guys one more chance to grab cookies, refreshments, and also want to remind everyone, the Gaza Patriots do put this on themselves, and that's the free will donation there in the back. So if you would be so inclined to help them continue to do these events, contribute there in the back of the room.
Cookies are I know it. Christy's daughter's getting
We are going to try and get rolling here just a little bit ahead of schedule. Like I said, we have a lot of really good questions we want to try and cover here. I want to thank you all for coming. To begin, we'd like to invite Pastor Mike Cooper up here to lead us in an opening prayer.
Would you bow with me? In heaven, we just ask you to be with us, which is sometimes a silly thing to say in a prayer because you're always with us. But we do invite your presence in this meeting so that we can honor you as we talk about the things of this world, as we look at the things in our state, as we get some questions answered and learn some more about what it's like to be an auditor for the state of Iowa. We pray for your clear voice to be spoken as we strive to seek truth through meetings like this. We thank you and honor you. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
And now I'll have you turn your attention to the front and join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening and welcome to yesterday's memories. Tonight, the Gaza Patriots have the honor of hosting your Iowa State Auditor, Rob Sand. I'm Danny Rader, joined by Denise Steffen, both of Sutherland, and will be your MCs for tonight. For those unfamiliar with our Gaza Patriots, they're a local group who, simply put, seek to find truth through education. With that, let's get into tonight's ground rules. As mentioned, this is an opportunity to educate ourselves as citizens and voters. This is a nonpartisan event, and will be conducted as such. If you've joined us in the past, you know we've typically taken questions from the floor, but tonight we will be fielding pre-submitted questions to keep things on topic. With respect to Rob's time, we are limited and have condensed some things. Many questions submitted were of an opinion nature or of an area Rob's office does not preside over. Please remember he is an auditor and not a legislator, and questions related to such were removed. Also, no disrespect or disruption at any point tonight will not be tolerated. If you choose to conduct yourself in that way, you will be removed. Let's get educated together. Rob Sam was born and raised in Decorah, Iowa. He found a passion for public service in high school when he worked for 2 years to build a public skate park. Graduating from Decorah in 2001, Rob went on to undergrad at Brown University. From there, he came back to Iowa and attended law school at the University of Iowa, where he was the first student to be both a president of the Iowa Bar Association and an editor-in-chief of the Law Journal. Rob is Iowa's 33rd state auditor, following 7 years of public service as Iowa's chief public corruption prosecutor in the Iowa Attorney General's office. While in the AG's office, he led discovery and prosecution of the largest lottery rigging scheme in American history. He has criminally prosecuted dozens of other financial crimes, as well as violent crime and nearly 24 sexually violent predators. Rob and his wife Christine live in Des Moines and have 2 sons. We welcome Rob to Northwest Iowa and look forward to learning more about his position and service to the state of Iowa. Welcome, Rob.
Hello. All right. Happy to have the prayer, happy to have the pledge. We're missing one thing, which is a psalm. Now, nobody wants to hear me sing the Star Spangled Banner. But one thing that I did recently that I bet this group would entirely be good at is one that's a good sing-along because it's an easy song. And that's the first verse of America the Beautiful. Would you guys mind singing it with me? Someone who's good, start us out.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, forever waves of grain, for vertical mountains, majesty, above the fruited plain. America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
Thank you for learning. Is that you? All right. Thank you all for being here. This is actually the second event I've had at yesterday's Memories. We had one back in 2022 when I was running for re-election. I appreciate you all inviting me up, and I'm happy to be here talking to all of you. Looking forward to the questions too. Where to start? When I ran in 2018, I think the biggest piece of doing that was knowing people who had been working in the auditor's office already and really having enjoyed working with them. As the introduction noted, I had been the chief public corruption prosecutor in Iowa. And so most of my work there was the auditor's office would conduct an investigation and it would come to my desk. And oftentimes I'd go to the building it was then in, the Lucas building, and work with Jim Cunningham or Nat Campbell and work on holding somebody accountable. What I loved about working with the people in the auditor's office is they were mad too. When somebody was abusing a position of power and trust in society. Government accountability is central to democracy. Central to it. This is something that goes back to the Constitution when our founders said, you know what? We don't want to have a king or a queen. They got too much power. Let's give a little power here, a little power there. We'll do 3 branches, right? We're going to divide them up. We're going to have them check and balance each other. When they did that for the Iowa Constitution, they said, you know, we ought to have somebody who's riding herd over the whole thing and can, pick somebody up by the scruff of the neck if they're misusing money and make an example of them. So they created the State Auditor's Office, and that is fundamentally the job. We're the taxpayer's watchdog. right? So like a watchdog, we can sniff around and we can bark. Somebody else, once we're barking, has got to be the one that goes and takes action off of it. For example, when I was at the Attorney General's office, if the Auditor's office investigated something and sent it to me, it'd be my job to figure out who's going to get indicted and for what and go take it into court. And so that's what I did for 7 years. I did notice, close to the end of that 7 years, that my work was darkening my view on the world. You can do a lot of wonderful things if you're a police officer. You might be the first responder in an accident. You could help a kid get their cat out of a tree. If it's coming to the prosecutor's office, it's just the ugly stuff. The worst things that human beings can do to each other. And I've always been a happy and an optimistic person, but I realized one day that was changing because I tried to describe myself to someone and then the same words came out, but it sounded more like this. I'm a happy, optimistic person. And I kind of realized, I'm changing, and I think it's mostly the fact that I get up every day and all I do is think about the worst things that people do to each other. Maybe I can do something that's still doing public service, but is having more positive impact. My interest in public service comes mainly from two things, my faith and my experience growing up in Decorah, getting a skate park built in Decorah, which made me a believer that through our system of self-government, we can help address the problems that we face together in society. So I had noticed a couple things in the auditor's office that I thought should be done differently. I thought, well, if I ran for state auditor, I could fix those things. I thought that they needed a little bit more law enforcement experience, like a police officer or a prosecutor in the office, because there had been a couple situations where the investigation that they had done made perfect sense if you're an accountant or an auditor, but it wasn't going to work in a courtroom, just a different set of rules. And I didn't think that alone was a good reason to run, so I dug in, I read more about the office, and I realized that they have a really tremendous capacity to promote government efficiency. Boom, I was in. I was excited to be state auditor, words that I never thought would ever come out of my mouth prior to that moment. But this office is supposed to be this engine for government efficiency. They have a very broad mandate in Iowa law to help improve how we treat tax dollars, including what I think is the funniest piece of code in Iowa history. And yes, I'm a lawyer, maybe I'm a bit of a nerd. I do think there's a law that is funny in Iowa. I bet you will too, though, because it says part of what the auditor's office is supposed to do is it's something to the effect of reduce duplication and improve efficiency, which is saying thank you, yeah. You're saying the same thing twice, two different ways, and the point of it is to say less. I thought, well, I could get up every day and think of a new way to make government more efficient. So I ran in 2018 and won. In 2019, we started our program called PI. PI stands for Public Innovations and Efficiencies. That is our government efficiency program. It is so good that it has been copied in other states. You may have heard of it. I want to check. Let's see here. Some of our winners have actually been from the area. Paulina has participated in the program. The O'Brien County Attorney has participated. South O'Brien School District has participated. Harris, Sibley-Ocheyedan Schools, the Osceola County itself and Sibley. Fostoria has, Spencer has participated. The schools, excuse me. Meriden. Okay, Larrabee, Marcus, Meriden, Cleghorn Schools, City of Marcus, and then from Sioux County, MOC Floyd, Sioux Center, Rock Valley, Ireton, Sioux Center Community Schools, West Sioux Schools, Rock Valley Schools, and Sioux County itself, and then Boyd and Holt. So this program, is anybody here an elected official from the area? No? Yes, all right. All right, thank you for being here. Thanks for participating in the PI program. It's really simple. About a 9-page checklist of things that local government can do to save money. If you want to do some of them in your home, they'll save you money too. It's at auditor.iowa.gov/PI. You can read the whole list. What we do is we send it out every year to every school, every city, every county in the state. We tell them, fill out what you're doing. And send it back to us so we can see how you're doing. And then you're automatically entered into the pie contest. So we call there's a lot of bad puns with this. We call the program list the pie chart. And then there's the pie contest. And then we also collect ideas. If you send us an idea for how to save money, that's a pie recipe. All kinds of terrible jokes. My favorite is one of the ones actually from Dickinson County. They built basically a swamp cooler with their courthouse. It's pretty simple. The electricity is cheaper at night and it's more expensive during the day. And so what they did is they said, well, your air conditioning, it's only running in the daytime when it starts to get hot. And it has to do all the work it's going to do with that expensive electricity. So what they did is they built a big underground ice machine next to the courthouse in Dickinson County. At night, with the cheap electricity, it makes cold ice. So all it has to do in the daytime is turn on a fan and blow the air over it. They're saving hundreds of thousands of tax dollars by doing that. That pie recipe went into our program, and then we send that out every year again with new ideas. We are saving millions of dollars for taxpayers. Long term, we could be saving billions of dollars for taxpayers, not an exaggeration. So it's a fun program. It has been a source of happiness. I stopped actually on the way up here today in Nevada for Story County. They won an award, and then Boone County was the most improved county for the year. And so when I come to town, I bring a certificate and I bring an actual pie. And we have a slice of pie. That means that there might be days where I have to eat 5 slices of pie. But I love public service, and if somebody has to do that for Iowans, I'm willing to bite that bullet. The other thing that we do in the office, in addition to financial audits, is we do public corruption investigations. So you're probably familiar with our work in that regard. If we get a qualifying request, then we can consider diving in to do an investigation. We have to have a request from an elected official of the entity, an employee of the entity, or enough signatures on a petition in order to give it consideration. And so that's the other piece that we do. Since coming in, we also made a change that we call statewide work, statewide jobs. And the idea behind that is pretty simple. We do statewide work, now we offer statewide jobs. There is no reason that all of the economic benefits of the tax dollars you pay from up here should only allow employees who are having those jobs to live in Des Moines, Ames, or Iowa City, all right? It's 2024. You can work from anywhere. Oh my goodness. What's your name? You just audited the auditor. Do you want a job? Okay. You've got to have a 2-year, that's another change you made. You do have to generally have a 2-year accounting degree. Send in an application. I like the assertiveness. I do. It's 2025. Thank you. It's 2025. There are so many jobs that you can do from anywhere. If you're living in a small town, you know you want people to be here. If they're down in Des Moines, they're not contributing to the local economy. Their kids aren't a part of the local schools, right? And I'll tell you, I remember, born and raised in Decorah, I remember what it felt like when a business closed down on Water Street. Remember the conversations that my mom and dad would have. You know, the food wasn't that good. Maybe we should have gone there more. I only tried it once. I should have gone back again. It wasn't fair of me. I knew they were struggling. Right? We have this shared sense of responsibility in a way that doesn't exist outside of small towns and rural areas. And then you're in that other conversation, well, you know, I heard so-and-so, they're not doing so well either. What if they close down? And then we've got 2 empty storefronts downtown. Then what happens? If state government wants to serve everybody in the state of Iowa, we should be pushing jobs into those places, not stopping them from going there. So when I came in 2019, we right away said, you live wherever you want. You can do this job remotely. If you got to go to a client, you want to live in Northwest Iowa, that's fine. We'll try to assign you to clients that are in Northwest Iowa. We're not going to have you drive all the way down to Lee County, right? But that saves money for our clients too. Because we're auditing O'Brien County, and we have somebody who's in the area, that's 1 less hotel that they're going to be billing to the client. You can do a lot of mileage I don't care how much mileage, it's not going to be as expensive as a hotel stay, even at the state rate, which isn't that bad. So we made that change, and we also started accepting folks with a 2-year degree. I think for too long we have pushed people to say, like, oh, you got a 4-year degree. What for? I mean, I know what for in terms of, okay, you're going to go be a doctor, sure, right? Lawyer, okay. Not fully convinced. But there's a lot of things that you can do that you don't need a 4-year degree to do. And we have this paper ceiling that stops really smart, talented people from ascending above it. And so in 2022, we made the change in our office. You can get the same job you get with a 4-year degree with a 2-year degree in the auditor's office. I think that's a good thing to do. We have hired people since then. They're making the same wage and they're doing good work. We haven't noticed much of a difference. And I think, personally, if we're the taxpayer's watchdog, wouldn't we want the kind of mindset that people have when they choose to get that 2-year degree instead of the 4? Right? Because it's the kind of person who says, hold on a second, I get the same job with the same salary by going to school for half as long and spending less than half as much money? And you think I'm the one that's making a strange choice? We want those people in our office doing our audits because they're the ones that we're going to say to the city council, I know that everybody has always done it that way, but this is a better way to do it and it'll save you a bunch of money. So I'm glad that we got those folks there. Now we have faced some challenges in the office. One is we have had a nationwide shortage of accountants and auditors. This started tied to COVID, although a big piece of it is simply generational. Baby boomers are the biggest generation, and as they are retiring and getting up out of their cubicles to go off to the golf course, there's not as many auditors or accountants to replace them. And so that's been a challenge for us. It was one of the reasons we decided to start opening it up to folks with a 2-year degree. The biggest challenge by far, though, and this gets into some of the meat of the conversation tonight, is the fact that the state of Iowa, at the beginning of my second term, the legislature passed and the governor signed a bill gutting our ability to find your misspent money. And we can talk in detail about this. I could go on, I won't. I point out that we had bipartisan opposition to this bill because I think that's important to say. There were 6 Republicans in the Iowa House that voted against the bill. But it went through the Senate so fast, there were some senators that even said on the floor, I haven't had a chance to read this bill. Why? Because it was a bad bill. That's why they ran it so fast. They didn't want anybody to get a chance to read it. This is so often how partisanship works. Oh, it's a good bill, trust me. Well, you're wearing the same color hat as me, so I guess I'll trust you, right? This is how broken our system is. This bill, and you might have heard things about it, about why it's a good idea. This ain't a he said, she said. The entire auditing profession, nationwide, government watchdogs of both parties, wrote to the state of Iowa, to our legislators, to our governor, to say, this is going to increase waste, fraud, and abuse of your tax dollars. Do not pass this bill. Who all am I talking about? On only 24 hours notice, more than half of the state auditors in the country, Democrats, Independents, Republicans. The American Institute of CPAs, which, do we have any CPAs here tonight? All right. The American Institute of CPAs, a CPA will tell you, they write the standards. They literally write the rules for how we do audits in the United States, both for the government, for public sector audits, and for the private sector. They almost never weigh in on legislative issues because the nature of the auditor is you do the thing, and then we address whether or not you did the thing with integrity. It's an easy way to think about auditing. We're not in the wisdom business. We're not telling you whether or not that's a good idea very often. We're in the integrity business. You chose to do this, and we're going to see whether or not you did it the way you were supposed to. They made a very rare exception to weigh in on this bill and say, hey, you shouldn't pass this. We're the people who know how auditing works. We write the standards, the rules for them. This is going to increase waste, fraud, and abuse. The Institute of Internal Auditors, same thing, same idea. They said this is going to increase waste, fraud, and abuse. A guy named Dave Walker, he was the United States Comptroller General for the vast majority of George W. Bush's presidency. And in 2018, he was the Republican nominee for governor of his state. He wrote 2 letters. He read the House, or the Senate bill that passed first. After that After it passed, he read it, he said, hey, you shouldn't pass this, it's going to be bad. Then the House made some amendments. He read the amendments and said, I read your amendments, this is still a bad idea. You still should not pass this law. It passed anyway. Absolutely irresponsible. And everybody here knows why. Here's what it does, I'll tell you what it does. Creates 8 categories of documents that we can't look at anymore. Then a 9th category, kind of a catch-all. Anything else that someone might expect there's some privacy in, right? That's not a good idea. Why? Well, I'll pick on Kevin. Let's say that Kevin's a state employee, and he sends an email that says, boy, this program is sure basically lighting money on fire. It hasn't worked well for years, and I really don't want to do the hard work of fixing it. And then maybe the state auditor decides to come in and look at that program, audit that program. Well, that email's got personal information on it because it's got Kevin's name on it. And he might want a little bit of privacy to that email, won't he? And so they can just sort of say, oh yeah, you can't look at that. And then here's what tops it all off, cherry on top. We used to be able to go to court. We could take a state agency or a state department to court if they were not providing us the documents that we were owed. We did it once in my first term. Yes, I went to Iowa for law school, go Hawkeyes. But then we sued the University of Iowa because they wouldn't give us information related to the biggest single debt deal in Iowa history. Taxpayers are on the hook for $1 billion over in Iowa City for their utility plant. And I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any conflicts of interest. People on both sides of that deal. They wouldn't give us the documents, we went to court, we got a unanimous decision from the Iowa Supreme Court. Now we can't do that anymore. Instead, we would go to a 3-person panel that would make the decision. The 3 people on that panel would be one person from the state agency that we are auditing. 9 times out of 10, they work for the governor. The second person from our office, and a 3rd person appointed by the governor. You don't need that 2-year degree in accounting to figure this one out, do you? So they can say no whenever they darn well please. And if we bother to appeal it, we're just going to get the same answer, aren't we? Because they had already told them no the first time. If the agency went up and said, hey, we'd like to not give them this stuff, we bet they're aware of that. And I'm not interested in a dog and pony show. I'm not interested in wasting time. I'm not going to do a pointless appeal. So twice already, they have done exactly what we said they were going to do when they passed this bill. Withheld documents that would have told us whether or not your money is being wasted, defrauded, or abused. First time, Border Patrol. We had a very credible tipster come to us. Hey, Border Patrol is not following their own rules for how they do your business. When they're meeting to decide whether or not someone should get parole, they're not following the rules for how those meetings are supposed to be conducted. Okay, so we go to the Border Patrol for our audit. We say, hey, here's all the materials we want to look for. And they say, oh, we know why you're asking for those materials. You know, we did have a problem with that. Yeah, we weren't doing it right, but we fixed it all by ourselves. And because we're Iowans, we're like, oh, good for you, that's great. And then we remembered we're the auditors, we're like, we should still look at this stuff, and we gotta make sure. Trust but verify. Ronald Reagan said that. Let's do the verify part, that's our job. And they said, no. We don't want to give you the stuff. So we had to issue a report saying, we don't actually know whether or not your Border Patrol is following its own rules. You can use your common sense to decide whether or not they're following the rules. And then we just had another instance just this year, just a couple months ago. $100 million that was spent on the state's new school vouchers program. And they won't let us look at the controls. They won't let us see where that money's going or what they are doing to make sure it's actually being spent responsibly. $100 million. And it's a new program. Go ask a CPA friend. What would you think about when you saw a new program? They tell you it's a higher risk. It means it's something that you should be auditing. We weren't allowed to look. There were a few things that were stated as excuses. Some of them were a little bit personal about me. The one that sounded official was, well, Sam needs to go get a new engagement letter. You know, if you don't do your homework, you gotta have something coming out of your mouth with the teacher other than I didn't do it, right? My dog ate it. That's the classic. Because you feel bad and you don't just want to come out and say it. Well, folks, they don't want to come out and say, we don't want the auditor's office poking around and where that $100 million went. So they got to say something. So they use an official sounding thing, engagement letter. Sam needs to do the right paperwork. Here's how you know that that's just not true. The Iowa Supreme Court has already said twice that we don't need to do that. Auditing standards don't say we need to do that. Iowa law says we don't need to do that. So they got to say something though, don't they? And that's what they said. This law is stupid. It's just wrong, right? It is wrong. You all drove here tonight, I assume. Let's say you're driving home, and it's still light out. You look in your rear view, there's a cop there. Where do your eyes go next? Speedometer. I once had one guy say beer can. I hope he was kidding. Everybody else has the exact same answer, speedometer. Because when you know that somebody's looking that might get you in trouble, you mind your P's and Q's, don't you? So do I. Whoop. How fast am I going? When you create categories of documents that the auditor can't look at and then you add in the catch-all, you may as well pass a law that says, hey everybody, no law enforcement allowed to patrol on county roads anymore. What you gonna do on county roads? Speed, drag race, do drugs, right? You got a problem? Take it to a county road. Cops can't look there. Again, this is just dumb. It's just dumb. It's wrong. It's a terrible thing to do. It's disrespectful to taxpayers. Now, a lot of people say, well, Ron, did they do that because you're a Democrat? They said, no, they did it because I take the job seriously. In my first term, we uncovered a record amount of misspent money in the state of Iowa. I told everybody, I'm going to be assertive in this position. My slogan in 2018 was wake up the watchdog. Why am I going to be assertive? Because you want to have the police officer right there behind you so that you mind your P's and Q's, right? I had 2 stories that I will take to my grave as confirmation that I was doing the right thing. They both were in my first year as state auditor. One was a guy from northeast Iowa. He's on the other side of the aisle, an elected official, and he's a state employee. And so you know he's not just saying this to say, he said, I've never seen more middle managers worried about what the state auditor's office is going to do. Music to my ears. Please worry. If you're a state employee and you're handling tax dollars, please worry. And then the other one. The guy said to someone that he was working with, he didn't know that we used to work together. Well, you know, our state department, we used to make these purchases and we know they're technically illegal, but we didn't think it was that big a deal. But it seems like the new state auditor, he's more willing to call us out for it, so we quit. This is deterrence. This is the Lord's Prayer, folks. Lead us not into temptation. I was so happy hearing those 2 stories. I'm helping other people be led not into temptation. Don't even think about making those illegal purchases, because we will call you out for it. Yes, we will. I felt understood. And I felt like I was doing my job. And what comes along as a result? A bunch of people in Des Moines who say, I don't want people knowing if money gets misspent. Because I'd rather protect my own interest than have taxpayers know the truth about their interest. I'm going to try to stop on this one because I can keep going. And it makes me so upset. It is wrong. I was proud to have bipartisan disagreement with it. Since then, I've had legislators who have actually apologized for voting for it. Don't think that happens very often. State of the state budget was the other thing we thought we'd get into. And here's the state of the state budget. There's a lot of money in the surplus accounts. There's no doubt about that. During COVID, the state of Iowa got $14 billion more from the federal government than what you would have normally expected, right? A lot of federal money comes and flows through the state. The graph of that money, you won't be surprised, is on a general upward trend. Had that trend just continued, they would have gotten $14 billion less. Fair enough, everybody following? A bunch of money came out. We've got a lot of billions, 6, usually, depending on how you count it, in those surplus accounts out of that 14 still. Why is that there? Because the last couple of presidents who were there during COVID sent a lot of money to the states. What the state has done with that is effectively create a fiscal time bomb. Because tax cuts have been instituted that are so large that at this point we are using that one-time money for ongoing expenses. This is something that every state auditor has always expressed concern about when they see it. One-time money for ongoing expenses. And I know you understand, it sounds like a phrase, but here's what it is. You get a little bit of inheritance from your uncle and you go, I'm quitting my job. The inheritance ain't going to come back again. I'm pretty sure your uncle's not Lazarus, right? So you're only getting that money once. Why'd you quit your job? But that's effectively what we've done. And it's hard to see after a certain point how the state is going to make ends meet. Because quite simply, we are relying on those surplus accounts, that's mostly federal, those extra federal dollars that came in, to glide for a few years. The glide is going to end at some point. And this year, the governor's budget proposed pulling, I think, $700 million from those surplus accounts to cover the spending because they're not bringing in enough money. Fiscal time bomb. Let me take a look at what time it is here.
Time for a question.
Very good. Did I go for too long or just long enough?
You're fine.
Okay.
You're fine.
You can tell me. I'm a big boy. That's why I'm here in front of you tonight. I like talking to people, including people who don't like me. I hope you guys do. I hope you do, but it's okay if you don't. I know I expect that there's people who don't, but I think this is part of the job. Isn't it the part of the job? If you're an elected official, you should be willing to go anywhere and talk to anybody that you represent. It's like going to your boss's office and reporting, and saying what you've been up to. Go ahead.
Okay. So first question, even here in Northwest Iowa, where Iowa NICE resides, instances of financial wrongdoing have been uncovered or suspected. In instances of suspected problems, how does one go about requesting an audit as it concerns government departments at local or state levels?
Great question. So we touched on this a little bit at the start. If you want to request something related to state government, just let us know about it. You can email us, you can call us. I have people, I do 100 town halls every year. We do it with advance notice. Last year actually is the first time ever we just announced all 100 on the same day. Just like, here, you want to come out? Come find me. It's a good thing to do because a lot of people will actually bring documentation to me when I'm out and about. And they're worried about making a phone call or sending an email because they're worried that might get discovered. But if they go meet me and then hand me something and then disappear while they're wearing dark sunglasses, yes, that has happened. Then they're going to be safe. But you can email it to us. We will not disclose your identity. I have been sued. You may have heard about this. The auditor's office got sued allegedly for not following the state's public records law. We have confidentiality requirements, and we had someone make a request where if we had honored that request, we would have been giving up some of our ability to protect taxpayer tipsters, to protect whistleblowers. Short story. It's kind of like we've got two boys in our house, 8 and 11. And you know kids, they want to know what I get for Christmas, what I get for Christmas. I'm not going to tell you. Well, what if I guess? If I guess what I got, then will you tell me? This was kind of like that. They wanted to know who the tipster was, but they didn't say, please provide the records of who tipped off the auditor's office about this issue, because they were mad that somebody blew the whistle. And instead they asked for specific people's names. Show me all of your correspondence with Kevin Virgil. We can't do that. We got a confidentiality obligation. I would rather my name get dragged through the mud in a lawsuit than have anyone in the state of Iowa think that we would give up their information as whistleblowers, right? And because we did that, I can stand up here and you can understand, you can trust us if you have a tip to provide. Now, if it's on a local issue, not state, you still want to send it to us, we'll probably let you know that you'll have to send in a petition if you're just a regular citizen. But if you're an elected official or an employee of the entity that you think there's wrongdoing in, you can just make a request, and that alone gives us a chance to consider doing an investigation.
Can you name and expand upon 3 major egregious expenditures for the state of Iowa?
Yeah. Workday. This is a computer program. This is the height of just an abuse of power. The governor's former chief of staff went to work for Workday. Workday is a computer program that can sort of help you administer large organizations. They have a private sector setup. But remember how earlier we talked about how there's different standards for accounting for the public sector and the private sector? They sort of had just set up a public sector Workday. The governor went to the legislature, said, please fund this. They said, no. And then COVID happened, and she said, yeah, I'll use the COVID funds. $20 million of COVID money to buy a software program for state government. This is through the CARES Act. There were 3 very simple rules for how you're supposed to spend CARES Act money. None of them were met. It was obvious. It was very clear that it wasn't allowed. They ended up having to refund that money. And then the legislature, wouldn't you love treatment like this? Even though there's a law in the state of Iowa that says if you spend state dollars in a way that's inconsistent with an appropriation, you actually can be held personally liable for it. The legislature went and backdated an appropriation for Workday. So they passed a law for the budget. They passed the state's budget, and for that little piece of it, they said, and we're going to pretend that we did this 9 months ago. So that way it wasn't meant that anyone was going to be held personally liable. Just imagine again, that cop pulls you over and say, yeah, I know I didn't do my registration, but look, I'll write the check out right now. Look, I'm putting a date on it for 9 months ago. Why don't you just run that into the county recorder's office and we'll take care of it. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Regular people don't get that kind of treatment, do they? That was one. Another one, same issue, as long as we're on the topic, CARES Act money that the governor put towards personal staff. She added $600,000 in spending for staff in the governor's office. That had nothing to do with COVID. It wasn't appropriate. I prosecuted the Iowa Film Office tax credit scandal. Boy, was that a mess. If you come to room 111 in the state auditor's office, you'll see some keepsakes. Some of them are on the wall, they're personal. I like bow hunting, I got a lot of deer on the wall. I got some business cards from people I've prosecuted. That's like the human version of the deer head on the wall. But one of the other things I have is a shovel with an exhibit sticker on it, and it's a junky shovel. But we all paid $250 to rent that shovel for 6 weeks. We rented a shovel for 6 weeks, and they charged through this tax credit program $250. The woman that ran that movie and applied for those tax credits went to prison.
And I know there will be a lot of opinions on this, so please minimize the grumbling and follow-ups. Can you expand upon K-12 public school auditing, when, frequency, and how said audits are held accountable to actions to be taken?
Absolutely. Every public school gets an audit every year. It's an annual thing. Public entities have the ability to choose who does their audits, so they'll put out a request for proposals. 1, 2, 3 entities might bid. 3 would be a stretch these days. We had supervisors. Do we have anybody on the school board? Talk to your folks that are on the... Have you guys gone out to bid for one recently or not really? How many bids did you get? How many bids did you get back? Yeah. 2's good, actually. A lot of times you only get 1. There's just a couple of firms doing school district audits in Iowa right now, so that one's tough. We do a couple of them a year. That's more than we used to do, actually. So it's once a year. And then the other piece of the question was, how do you make them do it? How do you make them fix the problem?
How do you hold them accountable?
Yeah. This is a really good question. Oh, go ahead.
You want to tell them about the SBRC?
The SBRC. Oh. She says no, so we won't. How do you get them to do it? So let's say they go in, and this is true, it's the same answer whether it's for the school district or the county or the city. When we issue our audit findings, remember what I said at the beginning, we're the taxpayer's watchdog? We sniff around and we can bark. But then it's up to somebody else to do something. We have findings that we have repeated for 5 years. And we come back and every year they're still not doing it. It's usually segregation of duties, trying to make sure that not one person is handling all the cash. Yeah, you know. And here's why, right? We're in Sanborn. Sanborn wouldn't get an annual audit, they'd get a periodic exam because it's that small. So little cities, but let's just say, we'll go back to school districts since that was a question. The school district, at the end of the day, a lot of times you're on the school board sort of because people wrote you in, or you didn't want to run again, but no one else was going to run, right? This is the same as being on city council or being mayor. My friend Scott, they wrote him in as mayor, right? He didn't run, he didn't want to be mayor, but he got writing votes and now he's mayor. A lot of these places are so small that you might not have enough people to do segregation of duties properly. Now, we're going to put it in the report that it's not being done, but if we start yanking people out, if the law allowed us to yank people out and say, well, you can't be mayor anymore, we're going to run out of mayors real quick. A lot of people are doing these jobs, these local elected official jobs. It's not their full-time job. They're hourly paid for it, breaks down to less than minimum wage, right? They're trying to have some time with their family. They're trying to be supportive of their community. If we start kicking people out for these findings, we're not going to have people to do the jobs. And so we rely on voters to decide whether or not this is a big deal. Again, we sniff around and we bark. Hey folks, we just did the audit for Sioux Rapids school districts. They were one of our PI award winners, so I'm making them up. They did a good job with efficiency. We just did the audit for Sioux Rapids school districts. Here's these 5 issues. A lot of people might look at it, read it, and go, okay, they're not perfect, but they're not doing so bad, right? Now, if voters want to say, this is terrible, it was 2 years ago you had 3 findings, and now you have 17, then maybe you decide that you want to run for the school board, and you want to take things over, and you want to do it better. Does anybody have a follow-up off of that? I hope that's pretty clear.
I think we'll have more.
Okay, all right.
But, we'll jump ahead with a question.
Okay.
In light of discussions you have had with government officials regarding ESA, what material weaknesses did your office uncover and what options for obtaining records have you pursued?
Great question. There were multiple material weaknesses in last year's annual comprehensive financial report related to ESAs. The big one was what we were talking about. We weren't allowed to look at the controls. And the controls are the question of, like, what are you doing to make sure this money isn't being wasted, defrauded, or abused? What we did to get the records was ask for the records repeatedly, demand the records, send over the CPAs that have been working in the auditor's office for decades under 4 auditors to tell them, this is us doing our job, right? But again, when we get into this whole, like, well, what did you do after that? It's kind of like, we can't do much anymore because they passed the law that precisely allows them to deny us these records. Everybody, you follow along? When they passed this law, what I said at the time was the most pro-corruption law in Iowa history. We said they're going to use this to deny us records. And then 18 months later, we hear, oh, the auditor's office is being denied records. Well, the answer is because that's why they passed the law. That's what it's there for. So they can say no. Now again, they can say things like, oh, well, you needed to do this. I'm sorry. We have dozens of CPAs and accountants in our office. We know the standards. And I want to get into this for a second. This is important to me. Being an elected official is about public service. Public service means the public. It means everybody. The first thing that I did when I got elected as state auditor, I had to decide who were going to be the deputies of our 2 divisions. Now my predecessor, after losing the election, but before cycling out of the job, before I got sworn in, tried to pick 2 people who said, oh, I guess I'm out. Hey, quick, you 2 retire, I'll put these 2 in before Stan can do anything. The state of Iowa said, you can't do that. Stan's going to make the decision. I put the same people in. I think everybody here knows I'm a Democrat. They're an independent and a Republican. They had both made financial campaign contributions to my opponent. I must be an idiot. Who today in politics promotes people that gave financial support to their opponent? Me. I don't want to do politics. I want to do public service. I want everybody in the state of Iowa to understand that when I say you can blow the whistle on a Democrat and we're going to do something about it, I mean it. I want everybody in the state of Iowa to know that just because you disagree with me about something doesn't mean that I'm not going to take it seriously when you bring an issue to our office. And the only way, maybe not the only way, but one good way that we can do that is by making sure that people know that across leadership in our office are people who think differently. So when we're sitting down to make a decision on the ESA program and we're saying we need to look at this, the conversation is about what the standards are. Because if we make the conversation, when you have a leadership team like that, that's got representation of all different viewpoints, if you try to make the conversation political, you're not going to have agreement. So when you got a Democrat, an independent, Republican trying to figure out what are we going to do, the questions you ask are, well, is this material? How new is the program? What's the risk assessment? What have other states seen in these programs, right? Or in other situations, what did we do when we had this situation 5 years ago, right? You ask the questions that you should ask if you're doing public service as opposed to politics. I hope that helps.
Earlier you quoted this as well, but Ronald Reagan stated, trust but verify. How do you suggest the voucher program use of funds be verified?
Well, an audit would work. But they don't like my suggestions. I mean, bottom line is that's the way to do it. That's why this office exists, to trust but verify, to be the independent voice that's saying, here's how this is working. And one of the best things we could do is repeal that pro-corruption law. Prior to that law passing, we would have asked for these documents and we would have a legal right to get them. And if they said no, we'd take them to court and we would just win. The law was that clear. The only thing that we couldn't look at that was in the state's possession were individual tax returns. Which makes sense for people because it helps them understand we audit the tax spenders, not the taxpayers, right? But there was no ambiguity whatsoever. Now you pass this law and you get this mess. That's how you would do it. It's worth talking about the structure of the ESA program too. Public schools get an audit every single year. Private schools that take public dollars are not allowed to be audited by the public. We can't audit them. We're not allowed to look at how they spend tax dollars. There's also only one rule in the ESA program for what they can't do with tax dollars. They're not allowed to pay a rebate to a parent of a kid that's going. Now that's a good rule. That makes sense. Because if you could pay a rebate, you'd say, oh, tuition's only $5,000, but we're going to charge you the full $7,500, then we'll give you $2,500 cash back free, right? But is that it? We got all kinds of rules for things that public schools can't spend money on. And I prosecuted, when I was at the Attorney General's office, public school employees for misspending money. I'll give you two of them off the top of my head. One was a cheerleading teacher, the other was the school administrator for Strawberry Point. If there's only one thing you can't do with that money, and we're already telling you we're not going to audit it, are we not leading people into temptation? A lot of wonderful people work at private schools. I got no problem with private schools. I will say this. I don't think the people who are there are the ones who are free from sin. Only one guy was. So when we tempt people, when we tell them, hey, we got no rules, and by the way, we're not going to look, they're going to spend money irresponsibly. They're going to spend money in ways that you would look at and go, this money's for education. But I'm not exaggerating. That program literally doesn't require that the money be spent to educate children. If you want to start a for-profit public school in the state of Iowa right now, please don't get any ideas. And you want to have a rule that you write down that says all the money we get from the state of Iowa goes into my pocket as profit. That is legal in the state of Iowa, and we would have no legal capacity to find out about that. Now, a lot of the folks who, when I realized this about the bill, actually I brought it to one of the guys in the legislature who was advocating for it. I said, hey, I just realized, all this money gets paid in as tuition, and there's no rules. And he said, I know, that's how we want it. We don't want public oversight of private schools. Why want public oversight of public money? And I think if you're going to have this program, then you got to have transparency so taxpayers know how that money's getting spent. And the parents either. They don't have any special right to look at this material either. Go ahead.
You have implemented the PI program to encourage government efficiency. What are you doing to uncover fraud, waste, and abuse?
Good question. We are doing what we've always done, which is we've got our investigative division. We also added a position in the office, created a new position for people with a law enforcement background. That is so that we can make sure that when we're structuring our investigations, we're doing it in a way that is going to work in court, if that makes sense. I'll spare you the story. There's ways to illustrate that, but it's sufficient to say an auditor will do things under their training that makes perfect sense for an auditor, but then if you've got to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt to convince somebody, the convinced jury that someone's committed a crime, it's not going to get you there. That makes sense? And so if we have somebody in the office with that law enforcement background working on those, then we're going to make sure that we do it right the first time. I did prosecute a case when I was at PAG's office where they put together a really nice report, but they made a series of assumptions in the report. And this prosecutor, the only thing I could do with assumptions in court is lose. And so I had to have my DCI agent basically redo a big chunk of the investigation so that we could say this is grounded in absolute provable fact, as opposed to assuming things. We have also implemented some software in the office that helps us work more efficiently. It's particularly useful for our investigative division. Back in 2019, we looked around and we said, hey, are there any AI tools that we can use that's going to help our work? And the answer was no. We did that again recently, and the answer was yeah. And we've got 2 now that we use.
Do you know approximately how much taxpayer money the state spends annually to publish legal notices, meeting minutes, etc. in newspapers when readership is down? Could it be of tax savings to publish those same notices online and modernize the practice of publishing such information?
I do not know the answer to that question. And I'm not afraid to say it.
Kind of opinion question, which I know I said we did
Go ahead.
avoid, but you're clearly a bright and educated individual who's accomplished a lot, including raising...
Go on, very opinionated. So far, a good opinion, a smart opinion.
including raising a lovely family. Politics is a really ugly ring to be in. What is your why?
Most fundamentally, I think my faith. I'm ELCA Lutheran, Norwegian from Decorah, of course I'm Lutheran. The Sand family, my dad grew up in Decorah, so we had his parents around and lots of aunts and uncles. When the Sand family gets together, we would be in church every Sunday. At home we say grace for meals, but when the Sand family gets together, we sing grace, we don't just say it. My uncle was a bishop in the ELCA church. My aunt Robin does artistic artwork. I'll put in a plug, Robin Sand Anderson. You can find some of her stuff on the internet. You might have seen it on the front of your bulletin now and then. When our second son was born, my wife suggested the name Axel. And my internal reaction was, heck no. But I thought better of that, and I looked it up in the big book of Scandinavian names, and it meant Father of Peace. And I immediately thought of the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the peacemakers. They will be called children of God. And how could I say no? So now we have Tate and Axel. I hate politics. I look at it so often and just think, what are we doing? This is stupid. Right? And that could be a pro-corruption bill, or it could be the line, right? You got liars in both parties. Newsflash. We have this dumb two-party system that tears us apart. When fundamentally we're supposed to be treating each other with kindness. I think it's one of the biggest impediments to a more Christian culture, or a more Christian civic conversation, is the two-choice system. Because all the consultants know, hey, all you got to do is convince them that the other guy is worse, and then you're in the clear, right? I may be a thief, but my opponent is a thief and a murderer. Vote for me. Will you quit stealing our money? No. They'll never kill you. Anybody else less than tickled to vote every time they're in the ballot booth? And so they know, hey, it's not true, but this is a pretty effective lie, and if you tell it to everybody, they'll probably, and you'll get enough of them to believe it. We shouldn't be lying. We shouldn't be bearing false witness. But we have a system where you're going to have to vote for the person who's lying if you're convinced of the lie's truth, right? Because you don't have another option. If we had more options, we would have a more civil, a more moral conversation in politics. Anybody with me on this? Let's think about it this way. Let's say there's 3 people running for the State House. Right now, if there's 2 people running, you see the other person's, and you're out, let's say you're the candidate, and you see your opponent's sign in somebody's yard. You're skipping that one, very likely, right? Because they're with the other person, they just got that one vote. If we had a different system where they could actually allocate support among different candidates, you might actually go talk to them anyway, because maybe they'll give you a little bit more support as opposed to a little bit less. Here's an easy way to think about this. Fargo, North Dakota does approval voting. Here's 4 candidates, vote for all of them that you approve of. Whoever has the most people that approve of them wins the race. Anybody not understand that? It's pretty simple. So in an approval voting system, if Kevin and I are running against each other and somebody's got Kevin's yard sign out, I still might go, because they can vote for me too, or they cannot. And when I go, I'm going to say nice things about Kevin, even if I'm fundamentally cynical, right? And that is the problem. There's so much cynicism in our politics right now. It's corrosive. It makes us tear our fabric apart, and it keeps us separated from each other. Getting off the soapbox.
In respect to your time, I'll give you maybe one more opportunity for your soapbox, as this kind of relates, and then you can wrap up as you see fit.
Sure.
There is so much turmoil across party lines. What do you see as opportunities to help bring our state together, to work together, to be more bipartisan?
This. How many of you are regulars? Give yourselves a round of applause. Who are our regulars here? I hope you get people taking you up on the invitation to come out to these things. We were saying just before we were getting started, you know, this goes back to the founding of this country. Alexis de Tocqueville came over from France and he goes, man, those Americans, they're so strange. They just get together with each other. And they form these associations and they talk to each other about important issues and they're active in their community and they just take it upon themselves to do stuff. Yes! Yes, we do. And that's a wonderful thing about this country and about this state. And I fundamentally believe it's these kinds of opportunities that can actually give us a path out of our anger and out of our bitterness and out of the venom that we see in politics every day. We got to talk to each other. There's a lot of people in both parties that don't want meetings like this to happen. I'm going to have Democrats real mad at me for being up here. I'll tell you the story. So yesterday, I went to 2 events. One was at my church. I had done in between the services, I had done the forum event a couple weeks prior. And because they had practice, the choir couldn't be there. And so the choir director said, hey, some of the folks in the choir want you to come talk to the choir and you do the talk. I'm like, very inefficient. I hate inefficiency. But on the other hand, I'm like, okay, I'll do that, right? And so there I was, literally preaching to the choir. And I talked about the importance of listening to people that you disagree with. And I said, people who are voting differently than you, try and give them 3 whys. Let them say what they said, and then ask them, why? And then listen to their answer, and then ask them, why, one more time. second or the third line, you're going to hear something you probably agree with. Anybody here think that's not true? So many of us, we want to climb the same mountain. We just are disagreeing among what trail or path we should be taking to get there. And so much of our division is incentivized by people who make a ton of money by driving us apart from each other. But I don't know very many people who hate other people. I know some people in both parties who really hate other people in the other party. And so I went to this group and I said, hey, just ask people why. Give them a chance. They'll probably end up saying something that you can say, actually, I agree with you on that. But here's my position that I get to from that point of view. And then all of a sudden, both of you are looking at each other in a way where you go, maybe you're not so bad. Wouldn't that be nice for a change? Just looking at people who vote for the other party and going, maybe you're not so bad. That's how I'm looking at everybody out here. I had somebody really, really mad put something on Facebook about it, saying, I don't remember what they were saying, I don't want to think of it, but they were really mad at me for doing it. So I'm sure they're going to be mad at me for being here. And I know that there were people who were probably mad at you guys for inviting me here. We need to be doing more of this.
We absolutely got pushback.
Yeah.
But we got a lot of praise too.
Good. What else? You got anything else?
If you want to kind of give your closing remarks.
That sounded like good closing remarks. And I do love efficiency, so I'm going to put the microphone down. Thank you all very much for listening. Thanks for having me.
Comment on hosting things like this. We will be having another event here May 2nd at 6:30. Brad Sherman will be stopping. He is running for the Republican candidacy for governor. And one last thing too, as mentioned earlier, if you would be so inclined as to contribute, the Gaza Patriots do put this on with their own money, so if you're willing to give a few dollars to help us continue these events, it would be greatly appreciated. As you came in there by the door. Thank you all for coming. There's still coffee, cookies, and water for you to trade your bread.
Sounds good. No, it's stiff.